Yesterday afternoon, I had the opportunity to attend the showing of a play, Sassy Mamas, where Emma was one of the character named Mary in the show. And one thing about, I'll have to say, black theater, we get into the show, we get into the play, and there were scenes where the characters on the stage were doing their thing and the people in the audience were talking back to them. There was one particular scene where one of the characters was proposing to one of the women in the play. The show was about older women who basically were getting their groove back with younger men. And in this particular one, the guy got down on his knee and he was asking her to marry him. And out of the audience, you heard, "Girl, say no, say no." And the woman sitting next to her say, "Say yes, say yes." And all throughout the show, there were people in the audience that were contributing their thoughts in a most vocal way with the actors and the characters on stage. And you don't see that in a lot of places. And as I thought about that process, I thought about how when people get so embodied and caught up in the things that are happening, and as you know, we are talking about the theater of your mind this month, how things happen, how really the things that experienced in that play yesterday are like what we are talking about. And even there are characters and actors that play roles on television who have shared the fact that their role becomes so believable that when they're out in public, people respond to them as if they are that particular character. Angela Robinson, who plays Veronica Harrington on The Haves and the Have-Nots, one of Tyler Perry shows that comes on the Oprah Winfrey Network, talked about going through the airport and how one of the TSA agents lectured her for 10 minutes about how she needs to be nicer to her son. And she kept telling him, "You know it's just a show, right? You know it's just a show." Ruth Warwick, and I'm showing my age now, anybody remember All My Children? Who used to play Phoebe Tyler on All My Children? The same way Phoebe was a most despicable character. And Ruth Warwick was the exact opposite. She was an activist, she was a philanthropist, she had adopted children from many different nationalities and races and did so many things like that. But so often people thought she was just like her character, Phoebe Tyler. When they saw her, they wanted to give her, a piece of their mind of those things. And so it is that way, though, when we start talking about the theater of your mind. And what we are pointing to and striving for this month is to understand that when we go about the process of shaping our lives, of manifesting, of putting into act and putting into place the things that we want to, it is that we allow ourselves for a moment, because if you think about it, in the theater, in the movies, with television, all of those things, we sort of suspend belief for just a moment. Sometimes you will hear that. And we allow ourselves to be in a place where we accept things that maybe in our ordinary day-to-day existence we would not. You think about the superheroes that we see and all of the things that happen to them and how they come out of that. I think about some of the movies where there have been people where there have been in a car accident, explosions and all of those things, and they hop right out of the car and keep walking. And I know I would be sore for weeks if I had ever gone through one of those things. And with explosions, I wouldn't be able to hear for quite some time, but for them, it's okay. But the idea is still the same, that we learn to, as we are moving about this process in our lives, to do as our title for today suggests. We learn to act as if. You'll say that with me, act as if. And if you recall, this past New Year's Eve. At our New Year's Eve party, thanks to Britannia, we had an act as if party. And what that was, for those who may not have been in attendance, it was the opportunity to decide what it is that we wish to experience in the year 2017. And we all had name tags that we wrote those things on there. And then we talked to one another and we acted as if we had already attained those things. We interacted and we spoke from that understanding. We spoke from that perspective. And it's important because if we are going to experience change, if we're going to have the change that we wish to see in our lives, the way that we get that change to activate and become a present reality in our lives is we have to already act and talk and think and even walk and do other things as if it's already done. Those of you that may recall that in the New Thought teaching, and one of the scriptures from the New Testament, the story about the master teacher Jesus being approached by a Roman centurion who said to him, he says that I have one of my servants who is ill, and I'd like for you to heal him. And Jesus was saying to him, well, give me a few minutes and I'll make my way to your house. And he said, that's not necessary. He said, I am an officer in the military. And when I tell my soldiers to do something, they do them. I give them the order and it happens. All you have to do is basically say the word. And Jesus says, well, in the same way that you say that, your servant is now healed because it is done unto you as you believe. Act as if. If we think about another scripture that says, as a man or woman thinks in their heart, so are they. As again. In the other way that we have that, the understanding is that already if we see the reality, if we feel the reality even before it manifests in our lives, we have the ability and the capability in the theater of our minds to live from that way. The teacher Neville talks about it all the time. He talks about acting as if, seeing it and feeling it and acting in the way that is already manifest in the mind of God. You hear us say that all the time. And almost all of my praying and the things that I say, one of the things that I declare that is already done in the mind of God. We get from Judge Thomas Troward the fact that what he calls the mental equivalent, that we already have the idea in mind, even if it's not here yet, even if we can't really see it. And a lot of times people think, well, you're faking it till you make it, and those kinds of things, and that may not always necessarily work. But my idea is that how are you going to know? How are you going to really experience it in your life unless you take that leap of faith, unless you allow it in the theater of your mind to see it? Because so often what happens for us is we spend a lot of time doubting those things. And we can declare that we wish to have something in our lives that we wish to experience. And it doesn't even have to be material things. It can be qualities of life. We want a harmonious life. We want a peaceful life. We want wholeness and health. We want all of those things. But so often what happens is we will declare that for a few minutes, maybe in a few seconds, and then the rest of the day, what are we doing? We're looking at all things that are opposite. We're repeating those things to ourselves that are opposite. And what I have worked at doing is that I have worked at, in my time, that whenever one of those negative thoughts or things come up, I already have, because I've worked on it, I already have a set of positive thoughts and positive things that I use to replace those negative things that arise. Because nature abhors a vacuum. So if you say, well, I'm just going to get rid of the negative thought, well, ultimately you don't really get rid of it. It just kind of steps back for a moment. And if you don't replace it with something else, that one negative thought that you sort of push back, I'm not going to think that, gets replaced by another one. So it's about having a sense of awareness of what we allow into our minds, of what we allow to express in our inner talk, in our inner thinking, to act as if, to be in that way. I remember saying a few years ago about Della Reese, where Della Reese wanted a husband. And so Della hadn't seen anybody really on the horizon and all of that. She decided, well, because Della Reese was a New Thought minister, she said, well, if I'm going to really have this happen and everything, I got to start acting like that he's already in my house. So she got her a pair of his and her towels, put them in the bathroom. She would put a place setting out at the table where he's going to sit. She got his and her pillowcases, and she would get up in the morning and she would look over next to her and she would talk to him as if he was lying in the bed beside her. Now, people might think she's crazy, but guess who showed up? Acting as if can be a powerful thing. And you know, it sounds kind of woo-woo, it sounds all out here and airy-fairy, but remember, we've been talking about the fact that one of the innovations that New Thought introduced to the world of athletics, world-class athletes now, almost all of them now, are trained to take some time and to see themselves performing whatever task, whatever sport that it is, successfully. They see themselves doing that way. If you listen to some of the Olympic athletes and the training that they go through, they now understand the connection between acting as if, seeing it, rehearsing it, having it be in their minds before it ever happens out there physically, and they are successful. Listen to some of the conversations. Listen to some of the interviews. Listen to some of the people. When reporters ask them questions, and they will say things like, well, I already saw that, or I spent time seeing myself do this, or see myself doing that. Listen to some of the other people. We understand that Bill Gates put aside 4 hours in his daily routine to just sit and dream and imagine what could be. Steve Jobs doing some of the same thing. Many other people acting as if, seeing it, creating it in the theater of our minds. And when we're able to do that, then things begin to line up in the universe. We get to the point where we employ inspired action. So we don't just continue to sit around, but acting as if means that we have the conversations, and sometimes you need trusted people to have those conversations with. Because there will be some people that will remind you, well, yeah, Della, I hear you got his and her towels, but he hasn't shown up yet. And Della decides she doesn't need somebody like that to talk to her. So we have to be in that way. And the thing that I look back on is at that Active New Year's Eve party, there are a number of people that had their name tags and had various things that they were looking to show up in their life that are now experiencing those things. That's not by accident. It's because we took the opportunity to see it. And when we can begin seeing it, and more importantly, feeling it, because if you think about Neville, one of the things he says in addition to acting as if, is feeling it real. Feeling it. What would it feel like? And again, the picture that I had behind me a few minutes ago was from the stage, because we're talking about the theater of your mind. But when we talk about the theater of your mind, we are not talking about being up, watching ourselves on stage, but we are looking out from the perspective of if we were doing the particular activity, seeing our hands in the picture, seeing the other people that are around us that we're having conversations with, seeing ourselves as if it were happening in front of us and that we are part of it, that we are involved. Having conversations, one of the great things that we can do when it comes to having conversations with other people, we can play those conversations in our mind. We can use that and have people saying things to us. Congratulations. Isn't it wonderful that you have now experienced this in your life? Way to go. High five. All of those things. And ultimately what that is, what Neville talks about, is that you bring those particular aspirations and those particular scenes that are in your mind into some type of condensed event where you hear the congratulations, you see the event unfolding. It's something as quick as a high five with someone else, or shaking someone's hand, or the tinkling of champagne glasses, or something to signify the wish fulfilled. Acting as if. Years ago, when I was still just an embryo in new thought, wasn't even yet, but I was in seminary, and I was doing my internship, and I've talked about before the internship, the church where I did my internship. This was back in the 80s, where they had 8,000 members. It was unheard of that time. Now, 8,000 member church for a lot of people is nothing. But back then, that was a rarity. And I was in my internship a part of the pastoral care staff. And we would meet every Tuesday where they would make assignments, because that church would visit the hospital 7 days a week. There were 13 of us on the pastoral care staff, and every day we went out to the various hospitals and we visited any of the members that were in there, because at any given time there would be 30 or more people in the hospital. So we had a southern route, a northern route, an eastern route, and a western route. So as we got together this one particular day, they shared the story of a young man. His name was Mark. His mother's name was Mary. Mark was just 19 years old. And Mark had been, unfortunately, in a car accident. His car struck a tree. He didn't have a seatbelt on. He was thrown from the car, and he was paralyzed. And they told his mother that he would probably never walk again. He could barely talk or respond or do anything. And so that particular day, it was the hospital that he was in was on my route. So I went to the hospital. I met his mother, Mary. We sat down. She started to tell me, they say that Mark will never walk again. But I don't believe that. I'm not going to believe that. I'm not going to accept that. And so I went into the room with her, because she would go in the ICU when the time was, and she would go in and she would sit and she would talk to Mark, and she would read scriptures to Mark, and she would tell Mark all of the wonderful things that he's going to be able to do with her. And the thing of it is that all of the hospital staff would look at her like she was crazy. When I got back to the church and we got in our staff meeting and we were talking about that, one of the other ministers that went the next day said, well, I think we need to help Mary prepare for the fact that Mark's not going to walk again. We need to put that out to her. So the next time I went, I sat with Mary, I listened to Mary. There was a part of me that was skeptical, but there was something about what she believed that was so powerful that I started believing with her. And so when we would go into staff meetings and they would say, they made an announcement that said, well, Mary has decided that she doesn't want visitation from any of the ministers from the staff, but you, John. So I would go. As much as I could, I would stop in. She would be there most days. She continued to do the things with Mark. And she shared it with me. She said, you might have heard that I told them that I didn't want some of the other ministers coming to visit because I don't want anybody that's going to be negative around me. And so you seem to be positive. So she said, I have some other friends that want to come by and want to get me ready for reality. She said, I would always have an errand for them. I would tell them, well, if you really want to help me, I've got some dry cleaning. Can you go pick that up? Can you do this? She said, because I didn't want that negative energy around. So I continued as much as possible to visit Mark, and then there came a point where things had shifted with my duties there in that internship, so I didn't get to visit as much or as often. That internship was for 11 months, and last Sunday that I was there, and they were bidding all of us farewell and all of that, and they had in the chapel, they had a service where we all were a part of that. And as I stood up, I looked coming through the back door, the doors open, walking a little bit laboredly, but walking, who came up to me. And in the best that he could speak, because he still was having trouble with the speaking as well, he said, "My name is Mark. Thank you for being there for my mother. Thank you for believing in me." Because they acted as if that day that a whole lot of other people said would never come, they kept saying that it would come. A lot of times when I have things happening with me, I think about Mark and his mother Mary, and the fact that they believed, they saw it in the theater of their mind, they continued to see it, they continued to talk about it. She would always talk as if Mark was walking and was around, all of those things. There is a presence and power that's available to us who live in the universe that responds. And as we act, talk, walk, do the things as if they are already done in the mind of God, because we know that they are. It's available to us. In the theater of our mind, we can experience and live from that place. And so it is.
I'm about Riverside, so I need you to stand up for me, because you know we all doing this. We all Joanne this. Here we go. Clap the hands. I'm laid down my burden, down by the riverside, yeah, down by the riverside, down by the riverside. I'm laid down my burden, down by the riverside, down by the riverside. I ain't gonna stay for taking this breath, knowing that there is only one presence and one power in the universe, and that is God. And as each of us takes in all that we have learned today, we take it in, we make it our own, and we simply live in those very truths. We give thanks for all who have participated. We give thanks for the music, the centering moment, the affirmative reading, the lesson, and just the energy that each and every person has brought into the space and into this place today. And moving forward, knowing that acting as if it can be fun, exciting, knowing that what it is that I'm putting out there, what it is that I wish to see myself being, doing, having, it's already done. It's already there. I walk that walk, talk that talk, smell those smells, taste what it tastes like, feel what it feels like. I live in a space and a place as if it's already done. Because it is. It is already done in the mind of God. Whether I want to fly an airplane, fix cars, stay at home and be a mom, be a master chef, or just work in my garden. I feel it. I breathe it. I just let it be who I am. Because it's already done. I act as if I release